Close your eyes if you'd like, or simply let your gaze go soft, resting on nothing in particular. Let your body settle wherever you are. Let your shoulders drop. Let your hands rest open and still. There is nothing you need to do right now, nothing to hold on to. For the next little while, you are simply here, listening and resting. Tonight we are going to a village in Japan, a small one, the kind that has existed in the valleys and the foothills of the Japanese countryside for hundreds of years, where the houses are close together and the mountains are visible from every doorway, and the river runs along the edge of the fields with the particular sound of a river that has been running through the same valley for longer than anyone can remember. This is one of the oldest stories in Japan, a story that every Japanese child has grown up knowing, that has been told by grandmothers to grandchildren, by parents to children, by teachers to students, for so many generations that the telling itself has become part of the fabric of the culture, part of what it means to have grown up in Japan and been given, early, the stories that shape how you understand the world. It begins, as so many of the old stories begin, with an old man and an old woman living quietly together at the edge of a village, not unhappily, not in the way of people who have been defeated by their lives, but quietly, with the particular quality of quiet that belongs to people who have accepted what their life is and have found in that acceptance a kind of peace. They had no children. This was the one thing that was missing, the one shape of the life they had hoped for that had not arrived, and they had lived with its absence for long enough that it had become simply part of what their life was, present in the way of all absences, which is to say, always there. The old man went to the mountain. In Japan, the relationship between the village and the mountain has always been a fundamental one, more fundamental, perhaps, than in most other places, because Japan is a country that is mostly mountain. More than 2/3 of the land surface of Japan is mountainous. The flat agricultural land, the cities, the rice fields, and the coastal settlements occupy a narrow belt between the sea and the slopes, and the mountains are always present, always visible, always the background against which the human life of the country is lived. They are not distant mountains, not the mountains of postcards and tourism, not the mountains you look at from far away. They are the mountains you live against, whose weather becomes your weather, whose streams become your water, whose forests provide the wood that your house is made of, and the fuel that warms it. The old man went to the mountain for wood. Gathering wood from the mountain forest was one of the fundamental tasks of village life in pre-modern Japan, a task that required specific knowledge of the forest, which trees were mature enough to cut, which could be taken without damaging the forest's ability to recover, where the best wood grew and how to get to it and how to bring it back. This knowledge was accumulated over a lifetime and passed down through generations. The practical wisdom of people who depended on a specific piece of land and had learned over time everything that piece of land could teach. The old man climbing the mountain path in the early morning, the mist still on the lower slopes, the trees darkening as the path goes higher, the sound of the village fading behind him, was doing what he had done hundreds of times before. He was not expecting anything unusual. He was simply going to the mountain as he always went to the mountain, in the way that all the important things happen against the backdrop of the ordinary, quietly, while someone is doing what they have always done. One morning the old woman went to the river to wash clothes. This was ordinary. She had done it many times. The walk from the house to the river, the same walk she had always taken. The stones of the path familiar under her feet. The sound of the water arriving before she arrived, announcing itself in the way the river always announced itself. She knelt at the riverbank and began her work. The water was cold, cold in the particular way of mountain rivers that carry in them the memory of the snow melt and the shade of the forests through which they pass. And the work was the ordinary work of hands in cold water with cloth, the repeated motion of washing and wringing that leaves the mind free to be elsewhere, while the hands do what they know. Then she saw it, coming around the bend in the river, moving with the current, turning slowly in the water, a peach, not a small one, a large one, larger than any peach she had seen, enormous, the kind of size that does not belong to the ordinary category of fruit, but to something else. Something that has been given more of whatever it is that makes things grow than the usual amount. It was the color of peaches, the particular warm pink red of a peach at its fullest ripeness, and it moved down the river toward her with the unhurried quality of something that knows exactly where it is going. She reached out and took it from the water. It was heavy. Heavier than a peach should be, heavier than its size alone could account for, with the weight of something that contains more than it appears to. She held it for a moment, feeling its weight, feeling the smooth skin warm in her hands despite the cold of the river. Then she carried it home. The river. In the old stories of Japan, rivers are not simply water moving through a landscape. They are boundaries between the settled world and the wild one, between the village and whatever lies beyond it, between the known and the unknown. And they are sources, places where things arrive from upstream that have not been seen before, and carry in them something of where they came from. The old woman went to the river every morning, not for the drama of it, not an expectation of anything extraordinary, but for the work, the ordinary work of washing that requires running water and patience, and the physical engagement of hands and arms in the cold. This is important. The peach did not arrive when she was waiting for it, did not come because she had prayed or hoped or performed any particular action designed to bring it. It came because she was at the river doing what she always did, in the way that unexpected things arrive, not in the moments of special attention, but in the ordinary moments, when you are doing the work and not watching for anything in particular. The river in the Momotaro story is the Asahi River, which runs through what is now Okayama City, the city and prefecture most closely associated with the legend, the place that claims Momotaro as its own hero, where his image appears on manhole covers and confectionery and signs, and the general fabric of the city in the way that beloved figures become part of the visual language of the places they belong to. But the river in the story is also every river, every place where the boundary between the ordinary and the extraordinary becomes thin enough for something to pass through. The old woman at the water, her hands in the cold, the sound of the current, and then the peach coming around the bend. The old man came home from the mountain in the late afternoon with the wood he had cut. His wife showed him the peach. He looked at it for a moment with the expression of a person who is trying to decide what category to place something in, whether it is simply an unusually large fruit or something that belongs to a different category altogether. He did not decide. He simply said, "It is a good peach. Let us eat it this evening." The old woman brought the peach to the table. She raised the knife, and the peach opened, not cut open, not divided by the blade, but opened from within, the two halves parting along a line that had always been there, the skin separating cleanly to reveal what was inside, not the flesh of a peach, a child, a boy, small and perfectly formed, curled in the way of something that has been enclosed, and is now, for the first time, in open space, blinking, looking up at the two faces looking down at him with expressions that contained everything they had hoped for, and had stopped hoping for, and were now receiving in a form they had not anticipated. They named him Momotaro. Momo, peach, taro, the common name suffix that means simply the first son, the eldest, the one who came first, the peach boy. He grew. Children in the old stories always grow faster than ordinary children. They grow at the speed that the story requires, and Momotaro grew quickly, becoming strong and capable at a pace that surprised even the two people who watched him every day. He ate well and slept well, and helped with the work of the house, with the particular quality of helpfulness that comes from a child who has been loved completely and has developed, in response to that love, a genuine desire to give back what has been given. The old man went to the mountain. The old woman went to the river. These two facts, stated at the beginning of almost every version of the Momotaro story, are worth staying with for a moment, because they say something about the world the story is set in and the people at its center. In the Japan of the old stories, the Japan of the villages and the rice fields, and the mountains covered in cedars, and the rivers running down through the valleys, the work of a household was divided between these two movements: outward to the forest for wood, outward to the water for washing, the man to the mountain, the woman to the river. Not because this was the only way it could be, not because these roles were fixed by nature rather than by custom, but because this was the pattern that the particular life of this particular time had produced, the pattern that two people doing the work their life required had settled into over the years. They were old. The old stories do not give them names. They're simply Oji-san and Oba-san, old man and old woman, the universal form of the elderly couple that appears in story after story in the Japanese tradition. Kind, hardworking, patient, living with what they have without complaint, doing what needs to be done with the unhurried quality of people who have done it long enough to know how it is done. There is a quality in these two figures that the Japanese tradition values deeply, the quality of living without excess, of being content with what is, of not reaching past what is given, but receiving what comes with gratitude and care. They could not have children. This was the one gap, the one thing that was not given, and they had lived with it with the same quality with which they lived with everything else, without bitterness, without the consuming resentment of people who cannot accept what they have not been given, but simply continuing, day by day, in the particular grace of people who have made their peace with their lives, and into this peace, into the particular quiet of a life fully accepted, the peach came. There is a version of this story that every Japanese person carries from their earliest years, a version that arrives before reading, before the ability to analyze or critique, before the layers of adult knowledge that make simple things complicated. It arrives in the form of sound, the grandmother's voice, or the mother's, or the teacher's. Reading the words that every version of this story begins with, mukashi mukashi, long, long ago, a phrase that in Japanese is not simply a temporal marker, not simply a way of saying this happened in the past, but a kind of opening, a way of saying we are entering a different kind of time now, the time of the story, the time where the rules of ordinary life are slightly different and things are possible that are not possible elsewhere. Children understand this immediately. They understand it before they can explain it, understand the quality of mukashi mukashi, the way they understand the quality of a lullaby, by the effect it has on them rather than by any analysis of how it works. Something settles when the story begins. The ordinary world steps back. The space opens that the story will fill. And into that space comes the peach. Not a picture of a peach, though the pictures are there in the illustrated books that accompany the reading, but the felt sense of a peach. Large, impossibly large, coming around the bend in the river with a kind of inevitability that only things in stories have. The inevitability of something that was always going to happen and is now happening exactly as it was always going to. The child listening does not know about the Kibi plain or the historical Kibitsuhiko or the zodiac symbolism of the monkey and the dog and the pheasant. The child knows a peach came, a boy was born, he was brave and kind, he went away and came back. And that is enough, more than enough, to carry through a lifetime, available for the adult to pick up again later and find, to their surprise, that all the layers were already there, waiting for the right moment to be seen. One day, Momotaro came to his parents and said, "I am going to Onigashima." Onigashima, the island of demons, a place that existed in the old geography of the Japanese imagination, somewhere out in the sea, far enough from the shore that it could not be seen from the mainland, close enough that what happened there was felt in the villages along the coast, the oni who lived there, the demons, the creatures that the stories describe with horns and clubs, and the particular ferocity of beings that exist outside the rules that govern ordinary life, had been taking things from the villages, crops, treasures, peace. Momotaro said, "I am going to put a stop to this." The old woman did not argue. She did what the mothers in the old stories do. She accepted what her child had decided, and she prepared what she could to help him on the journey. She made kibidango, millet dumplings, small, round, firm, the food of travelers and workers, the food that keeps well and provides what the body needs for effort. She made them carefully, with the particular care of a person making something for someone they love who is about to go somewhere dangerous. Pressed and shaped with hands that knew this was the last thing they could do for him before the road began. Momotaro tied them at his waist. He bowed to his parents. He thanked them for everything, for the years of care, for the house and the food and the warmth, for the particular quality of the life they had made together in the small house at the edge of the village. Then he turned toward the road and began to walk. The old man and the old woman watched him until he was out of sight. Then they went back inside and continued the day in the particular way of people who are waiting, doing what needs to be done and not thinking too far ahead, and trusting that what has been sent out will, in time, come back. Kibi dango, the millet dumplings that Momotaro carries on his journey to Onigashima, are not simply food. They are the currency of the story, the thing that is exchanged for loyalty, the physical form of the agreement between Momotaro and his companions. And they are also a specific reference to a specific place. Kibi is the old name for the region that is now Okayama Prefecture, in western Honshu, on the coast of the Seto Inland Sea. It is one of the oldest agricultural regions in Japan. Rice cultivation was practiced here very early in the Yayoi period, more than 2,000 years ago, and it has long been associated with the particular fertility of the alluvial plains, where the rivers come down from the mountains of the interior and deposit the rich soil that makes the delta farmland of Japan among the most productive in the world. Millet was cultivated here alongside rice, kibi, the grain that gives the region its name. And the dumplings made from kibi were part of the food of the region, in the practical sense of food that people actually ate, food that sustained the bodies of people doing the work that the land required. The grandmother who makes the kibidango for Momotaro's journey is doing the most practical possible thing, giving him the food that will sustain him when there is nothing else, and yet the dumplings do more than sustain. Each one shared with a new companion is a kind of treaty, an agreement between two parties that something will be done together that neither could do alone. The dog receives a dumpling and becomes a companion. The monkey receives a dumpling and becomes a companion. The pheasant receives a dumpling and becomes a companion. The dumplings create the team, and the grandmother's hands, working at the stove in the early morning, shaping the soft dough into the rounds that will hold together through a long journey, are part of the victory that happens later on the island, even though she never sees it. On the road, he met a dog. The dog appeared at the side of the path, a large dog, well-made, with the quality of bearing that belongs to animals that have been doing something purposeful for a long time, and have developed, in the doing of it, a particular kind of presence. The dog asked, "Where are you going?" Momotaro told him. The dog said, "Give me one of your kibidango, and I will come with you." Momotaro gave him a dumpling. The dog fell into step beside him. Further along the road, a monkey appeared, from the trees at the side of the path, dropping down with the ease of a creature entirely at home in the dimension between branches and ground, looking at Momotaro with the alert, curious expression that monkeys have, the expression of something that is always assessing, always calculating, always a few thoughts ahead of the current moment. The monkey asked, "Where are you going?" Momotaro told him. The monkey said, "Give me one of your kibidango, and I will come with you." Momotaro gave him a dumpling. The monkey fell into step beside them. And then a pheasant. The bird descended from the sky with the particular grace of pheasants in flight, the long tail streaming behind, the colors of the feathers catching the light, and landed on the path ahead of them and turned to look at Momotaro with the steady, unblinking look of a bird that has decided something is worth its attention. The pheasant asked, "Where are you going?" Momotaro told him. The pheasant said, "Give me one of your Kibi dango, and I will come with you." Momotaro gave him a dumpling, and they were four, the boy from the peach, and the dog, and the monkey, and the pheasant, moving together down the road toward the coast, and the sea, and the island that waited. Why a dog, a monkey, and a pheasant? This question has been asked by scholars and by children for a very long time, and the most interesting answer comes not from the folk tradition, but from the old Chinese-influenced system of astrology and cosmology that was a fundamental part of how educated Japanese people, in the medieval period, understood the structure of the world. The 12 signs of the Chinese zodiac correspond to directions as well as to years. The northeast direction, the direction that in Japanese cosmology is associated with evil and misfortune, the direction from which bad things come, is called the Kimon, the demon gate, and it corresponds to the space between the ox, Ushi, and the tiger, Tora. This is also, in the old stories, the direction of Onigashima. The Oni come from the northeast. The Kimon is their door. The southwest, the direction directly opposite the demon gate, is the Urakimon, the back demon gate, and the animals associated with this direction are the monkey, Saru, the rooster or bird, Tori, and the dog, Inu, 3 of Momotaro's companions. The pheasant stands in for the rooster. Both are birds. Both represent the same direction. And so the team that accompanies Momotaro is not random, but is the cosmological answer to the problem of the demon gate. The animals of the southwest, the direction of resolution, moving against the northeast, the direction of the problem. This is the kind of layer that the old stories often have. The surface story for children, clear and satisfying, and beneath it the deeper structure for those who look, the connections to the older systems of meaning that organized how the world was understood, the grandmother making dumplings, the boy setting out, the 3 animals joining him one by one, and behind all of this, the particular logic of the cosmos, the southwest going to meet the northeast, the answer moving toward the question, working itself out in the form of a story that has been told to children for hundreds of years. The road to the coast was long, not as long as roads in other parts of the world. Japan is not a vast country, and the distances between the mountain villages and the sea are not enormous, but long enough that the walking takes days, long enough that the companionship matters, long enough that the person you set out with is no longer a stranger by the time you arrive. Momotaro and his 3 companions walked through the days and rested through the nights. They ate what they had, the kibidango growing fewer, the provisions carefully rationed, and they drank from the streams that ran beside the road, cold mountain water in the cupped hands or from the surface directly, the way that travelers drink when they have been walking and are thirsty and the water is right there. They talked, perhaps. The old stories do not record the conversation. They move from landmark to landmark, from the meeting with the dog to the meeting with the monkey, to the meeting with the pheasant, to the arrival at the coast, without lingering in the ordinary time between. But the ordinary time was there, the walking, the resting, the gradual accumulation of shared miles that produces, between people who are doing something together, the particular quality of trust that cannot be produced in any other way, that requires exactly this: the shared effort, the shared discomfort, the shared arrival at each evening's campfire, with the knowledge that tomorrow will require the same thing again. By the time they reached the coast, they were not four separate beings who had made the same journey. They were a group. The particular kind of group that forms when different kinds of creatures have decided, for reasons of their own, that the same thing matters enough to be worth the effort. The dog's loyalty, the monkey's intelligence, the pheasant's perspective, Momotaro's purpose. Separate, each is incomplete. Together, they cover the ground. The Oni. In Japanese folk belief, the Oni are not simply monsters, not simply the generic villains of a story that requires something to defeat. They are something older and stranger than that, figures that appear in the oldest Japanese texts, in the Buddhist literature and the native folk traditions, in the paintings and the sculptures and the stories of 1,000 years, always recognizable, always themselves. They are large. This is the first thing, the scale of them, the way they exist at a size that is outside the human range, that makes the human feel small in a way that changes the quality of the encounter. They have horns, usually one or two, growing from the forehead, the horns of cattle or deer, translated into the human form, the particular strangeness of an animal attribute on a human body. That is one of the ways the old stories say, this thing is both like you and not like you. They carry iron clubs, kanaboo, weapons that are not the weapons of finesse, not the sword or the bow, but the weapon of pure force, the club that says, I am stronger than you, and this is how I intend to demonstrate it. Onigashima, the island sits out in the sea, beyond the sight of the coast, in the imagination at least, though the stories that try to locate it in actual geography have placed it at various points along the Seto Inland Sea, and the coasts of Okayama, and the waters off Shikoku. It is a place of abundance. The Oni have taken from the villages what the villages produced, and accumulated it on the island, and a place of noise and energy, and the particular disorder of beings who have power, and have not yet learned that power without restraint produces suffering. Momotaro and his companions reached the coast. They found a boat. The sea spread before them, the particular gray-blue of the inland sea, moving with the long swells that come in from the Pacific and break against the islands and the headlands with the patience that is geological, the patience of water that has been doing this since before memory. Momotaro stood at the prow of the boat and looked toward the horizon where the island waited. The dog sat behind him. The monkey sat behind the dog. The pheasant perched on the prow and looked where Momotaro looked. The boat moved out onto the water. The Seto Inland Sea. Between the main island of Honshu and the islands of Shikoku and Kyushu, the particular body of water that the Japanese call the Seto Naikai, the inner sea, is one of the most beautiful and historically significant stretches of water in Japan. It is not an ocean. It has the quality of an enclosed space. the islands that dot its surface breaking the view into sections, the distant shorelines always visible, the water between them never as open or as intimidating as the open Pacific that crashes against the eastern coast of Japan. It is a sea you can see across, a sea with edges, and in the old stories, in the period when the stories that became Momotaro were first being told, it was the route by which things moved between the different parts of Japan, goods and people, and sometimes armies and sometimes raiders, who came from islands that lay beyond the ordinary sight of the coast. The Oni of Onigashima in the Momotaro story may well be, scholars have suggested, echoes of these actual raiders, the people who came from the sea and took what was not theirs, and returned to their islands beyond the reach of ordinary response. In the old stories, what cannot be addressed through ordinary means is addressed through extraordinary ones. A boy born from a peach, 3 animals who speak, a boat crossing the inland sea toward an island that should not be approachable but is. The water of the Seto Inland Sea has a particular quality of light. The islands create sheltered areas where the surface is calmer than the open water, where the reflection of the sky sits more steadily on the water, where the mountains of the islands are visible in the surface alongside the actual mountains, and where, in the late afternoon, the light takes on the gold and amber of the setting sun in a way that makes the whole scene appear to be lit from within. Momotaro and his companions crossed this water. The pheasant flew above, and its reflection flew below, and the boat moved between them toward the island that needed to be reached. Three animals: the dog who walks beside you, the monkey who is always a few steps ahead, the pheasant who sees from above what those on the ground cannot see. These are not arbitrary choices, not simply the animals that happened to be nearby on the day the story was first told. They are the companions that the particular task requires. The dog brings loyalty, the specific quality of a creature that has made its choice and does not revisit it, that does not calculate its continued participation against the difficulty of the task or the probability of success, but simply continues, because continuing is what loyalty means. The monkey brings intelligence, the ability to see the problem from multiple angles, to find the path through that is not immediately obvious, to use the resources at hand in ways that the problem did not anticipate. The monkey sees the wall and does not see a barrier, sees instead the series of handholds that are already there, already available for anyone who knows how to look. The pheasant brings perspective. From above, from the altitude that flight provides, the situation looks different. The walls are shorter. The gaps between the defenders are visible. The approach that looks impossible from the ground looks entirely possible from the air. The pheasant can go where the others cannot, and come back with the knowledge of what it saw. Together, they cover what none of them could cover alone. This is the quiet teaching beneath the surface of the story. The thing it says not about heroes and demons, but about the nature of a team. That what matters is not whether each person is strong enough or smart enough or fast enough on their own, but whether together they cover the ground that the task requires. The Kibi dango bind them. The journey makes them more than they were, and what they bring back belongs to all of them. to the boy and the dog and the monkey and the pheasant, as much as it belongs to the village that is waiting. The island appeared out of the sea, dark cliffs, thick trees, the sound of the oni, their voices carrying across the water with the particular carrying quality of sounds that are not trying to be quiet, that exist in a world where there is no need to be quiet because nothing has yet arrived to require it. The pheasant flew ahead, into the fortress, over the walls, finding the way in with the particular freedom of a creature that moves in 3 dimensions, when the defenders of the walls can only move in 2. The monkey followed, up the gates and over them, finding the handholds that exist in every structure for those who know how to look. The dog at the gate, and Momotaro, at the gate, in the gate, through the gate, with the particular quality of movement of someone who has decided and is now simply executing the decision without the hesitation that precedes decisions or the doubt that follows them. The battle does not need to be described at length. What the story requires is that it happened, that Momotaro and his companions met the Oni on their own island and prevailed, and that in prevailing, they recovered what had been taken from the villages along the coast, the treasure, the things accumulated over years of raiding. The great Oni knelt. He said, "We surrender. We will trouble the villages no more. Please spare us." Momotaro looked at him. Then he said, "Go, return what you have taken, and do not come back." The Oni bowed, low, with the particular depth of a bow that acknowledges not just defeat, but the terms of what comes after. The boat went back across the sea, loaded now, with the things recovered, the gold and the cloth, and the various goods that had been carried off from the villages over the years, lower in the water, moving more slowly, but moving. The dog lay in the stern with his head on his paws. The monkey sat amidships and watched the coast appear. The pheasant flew alongside and occasionally above. Momotaro sat at the prow and watched the mountains of the mainland rise out of the sea. The Momotaro story has been read in many ways. In the Meiji period, when Japan was rapidly modernizing and looking for stories that could help define what it meant to be Japanese in a world that was asking Japan to be something new, Momotaro became a symbol of national character, the brave young hero setting out to defend the homeland against the forces that threatened it from outside. The story appeared in school textbooks. It was taught to children as an example of courage and loyalty and the willingness to face difficulty for the sake of others. This reading of the story has been challenged and complicated by later thinkers. Akutagawa Ryunosuke, the great writer of the Taisho period, wrote a version of Momotaro in which the Oni are the sympathetic figures, in which the island they live on is their home, and Momotaro's arrival is an invasion, in which the categories of hero and villain are less clear than the standard story suggests. His Momotaro is not simply brave, he is also careless, setting out not from a genuine desire to protect, but from a restlessness that finds its expression in conquest. These readings do not cancel each other out. They coexist, the way that all good stories contain more than one truth. The Momotaro of the standard version, brave, generous, loyal, setting out to return to the village what has been taken from it, is a real character with real virtues. The Momotaro of Akutagawa, privileged, powerful, acting from motivations that are less pure than they appear, is also real, also worth attending to. Both versions are in the story. The boy from the peach is both the hero of a simple tale and the subject of a complex one, both the figure that generations of children have admired without complication, and the figure that adult readers have returned to with more complicated eyes. This is what the enduring stories do. They hold more than one truth at once. They grow with the reader, yielding the simple reading first, and the more complex one when the reader is ready for it. The night before they reached Onigashima, they camped on the coast. The sea was close, the sound of it constant, the particular sound of waves on a rocky shore that is neither the crash of surf nor the quiet of a sheltered bay, but something between them, a steady, measured sound, the sea making its presence known without insisting on it. They made a fire. The fire on the coast at night has a particular quality. The wind coming off the water pushing it sideways, the light catching the spray from the nearest waves and making brief, small rainbows at the edge of the firelight, and sitting beside it with the dark sea behind you and the dark land ahead of you produces a particular quality of clarity. The clarity of a person who has come as far as the road can take them, and must now wait for the water. Momotaro sat with his companions and looked out at the sea. Somewhere out there, beyond the line where the sky and the water became indistinguishable, the island waited. He could not see it. He knew it was there. The dog lay beside him with his head on his paws, watching the fire with the particular patient attention that dogs bring to fires. The monkey sat slightly apart, watching the sea, doing the constant small calculations that monkeys make, assessing, considering, finding in the darkness of the water the information that might be useful tomorrow. The pheasant had folded itself into sleep, head tucked, feathers settled, already resting for the flight that tomorrow would require. Momotaro did not sleep immediately. He sat with the fire and the sea and thought about the old man and the old woman, about the house at the edge of the village, the garden in the late afternoon, the particular quality of the evenings there, the low light and the quiet, and the two people who had made a life together in a small space with great care. He was doing this for them. Not only for them, not only for the specific two people in the specific house, but for the particular kind of life they represented, the particular quality of a life lived with patience and care in a specific place over a long time. That was worth crossing the water for. The peach. In Japan, as in China, from which so much of the early Japanese cultural tradition draws, the peach is not simply a fruit. It is a sacred object, a fruit associated with long life and good fortune, with the particular power to ward off evil and bring blessing. The peach appears in the earliest Japanese mythology, in the Kojiki, the record of ancient matters, compiled in 712 CE, the oldest surviving chronicle in Japan. The god Izanagi, fleeing from the underworld after the death of his wife Izanami, throws peaches at the demons who are pursuing him. The peaches drive them back. This is the original power of the peach in the Japanese imagination, the fruit that the demons cannot withstand, the sacred sweetness that is antithetical to darkness, that has in it something that the forces of the underworld cannot approach. Momotaro was born from a peach. not simply born near a peach, not simply associated with a peach, but born from within the fruit itself, emerging from its center, the way that life sometimes emerges from the most unexpected containers. This origin is not incidental. It says something about what Momotaro is. It says that he carries in him the particular power of the peach, the ability to stand against what the darkness sends, the particular quality of the sacred fruit that has been given human form and human will. The Kibi dango, the millet dumplings, also belong to this tradition. Kibi is millet, grown in the Kibi region of what is now Okayama, the region most closely associated with the Momotaro legend, and the dumplings made from it are both the ordinary food of travelers and something more, the specific food of this specific journey, the thing that binds the companions together, that transforms the dog and the monkey and the pheasant from animals encountered on a road into something more than that, into partners, into the team that the task requires. Okayama, the prefecture on the western coast of Honshu that claims Momotaro as its own, has built a relationship with the story that goes beyond the usual relationship between a place and a legend. The Kibi Plain, the broad, flat agricultural area where the Asahi River and the Yoshi River meet the Sato Inland Sea, is the landscape of the Momotaro story. Walking through it today, you encounter the legend at every turn, in the names of the confectionaries that sell kibi dango at every train station and tourist shop, in the statues that appear in parks and at roadsides, in the festivals that mark the calendar and keep the story alive in the lived experience of the region. But the connection runs deeper than tourism. The legend of Momotaro is connected, by many scholars, to the actual history of the Kibi region, to a real historical figure called Kibitsuhiko no Mikoto, a commander sent by the Yamato court in the 4th or 5th century to bring the powerful Kibi clan under the authority of the central government. His opponent in this campaign was a figure called Ura, described in the later records as a demon, as an oni, who is said to have been a foreigner, perhaps a person from the Korean peninsula or from elsewhere on the continent, who had established himself in the region and was challenging the authority of the court. The battle between Kibitsuhiko and Ura became, over the centuries, the battle between Momotaro and the Oni of Onigashima. The historical conflict, real armies, real politics, real consequences, was transformed in the imagination of the people who told the story into the simpler and more universal form of the folk tale. The hero who sets out, the companions who join him, the island that must be reached, the return that brings peace. History becomes legend. Legend becomes story. Story becomes the thing that grandmothers tell grandchildren by the light of the evening lamp, while outside the rice fields settle into the quiet of the night. Why does this story last? Not all stories last. Most stories are told and forgotten, told for their moment, serving the need of that moment, and then released when the moment passes. But some stories outlast their moment. Some stories are told for 100 years, and then 100 more, and then another 100, told in different forms, with different emphases, for different purposes, and yet remain recognizable, remain themselves, across all the retelling. Momotaro is one of these. It has been told for a very long time, the earliest surviving written versions appearing in the Edo period, and in that time it has been a children's story and a nationalist symbol and a subject of literary criticism and a source of advertising slogans and a theme for festivals and a motif on manhole covers. It has been serious and it has been funny. It has been simple and it has been complex. It has been used by people with many different intentions to say many different things. And through all of this, it has remained the same story. A boy born from a peach, raised by two old people who loved him, setting out with companions who joined him along the way, crossing the sea to the island of the Oni, and coming back. The shape of the story does not change. What changes is what the listener brings to it, the age and the experience and the questions that the person hearing the story is carrying at the moment of the hearing. A child hears courage and adventure. An adult hears the old couple waiting, the trust they extended without knowing how it would end. A scholar hears the zodiac, the Sato Inland Sea, the echo of the historical Kibitsuhiko. All of these are in the story. All of these are the story, and the story endures because it is large enough to hold all of them. The road home is different from the road out. This is one of the things that anyone who has made a significant journey knows without being told, that the path back has a different quality from the path forward, even when it is the same road, even when the same trees stand beside it, and the same stones are underfoot. The path out carries the weight of what lies ahead, the unknown, the task that has not yet been faced, the question of whether what needs to happen will in fact happen. The path back carries the weight of what has already been done, which is a lighter weight, most of the time, even when what was done was difficult, because it is behind you, settled, no longer pending. Momotaro walked the road home. The dog walked beside him. The same easy gait, the same steady presence, but different now. Different in the way that anything is different after it has done something real, after it has been tested and found to be what it seemed to be. The monkey walked beside the dog, the pheasant flew overhead, and the cart came behind, slower than the rest, weighted with what had been recovered, its wheels turning on the path with the particular sound of something moving under load, the creak and roll of wooden wheels on a packed dirt road. The mountains appeared, first as a shape on the horizon, then as a presence, then as the specific peaks that Momotaro had known all his life, the ones visible from the field behind the house, the ones that told the time of year by where the snow sat on them and where it didn't. The river appeared next, not the place where the peach came, not the exact stretch of bank where the old woman had been kneeling in the cold, but the same river, the sound of it arriving before the sight of it, the particular sound of this water in this valley that was home. The village appeared last. The old man and the old woman were in the garden when they heard footsteps on the path. They had been waiting in the particular way they had agreed, without saying they had agreed, to wait, continuing the ordinary work of their days, the garden and the cooking and the mending, while something entirely other than the ordinary was happening somewhere out in the world. He came around the bend in the path, older now, or rather, more himself, in the way that a journey makes a person more themselves, fills in the outlines with the particular weight of experience. Behind him, the dog, walking steadily, the monkey, loose and easy, the pheasant overhead, and behind them all, the cart with its cargo, the things recovered, the evidence of what had been done. The old woman did not run. She simply stopped what she was doing and stood and looked at the person who had come back to her, at her son, born from a peach, returned from the sea, and felt the particular feeling of a person who has let something go without quite letting it go, and now has it back in a form that is different from how it left, but unmistakably itself. The old man came and stood beside her. They were quiet. Then the old man said, "Welcome home," and that was enough. Let it all soften now, the river and the peach coming around the bend, the two old faces looking down at the child, the road and the three companions, the sea and the island, and the battle and the sea again, the cart coming home heavy with what was recovered, the garden in the late afternoon, the old woman standing still. Welcome home. There is something in this story for sleep, not the battle, not the drama, but the beginning and the end, the waiting and the return. The two old people who continued their days while something larger was happening elsewhere, who trusted that what they had raised with love would find its way back, who were there when it did. Tonight, let what is out in the world be out in the world. It will find its way. Things do. For now there is only this, the house, the warmth, the particular piece of a place that someone has been waiting in, and is still waiting in, and will be waiting in when you are ready to come home to it. Rest well. Sleep well. Good night. New Japanese stories every day on Quiet Tales of Japan. See you again for your next sleep.